My name is Ed Glazer, and I'm the one that got us into this mess. And as you probably know, I've moved to Florida as of about a year ago? About
Year and a half.
Year and a half ago. And I have to say, Ken's doing an amazing job of running the company. Where's Ken?
Collecting more employees.
He's doing an amazing job, and at least from my point of view, and we're inventing a whole lot of new things, and the company is changing, which is good. We need to change because the world is changing. We have to stay up with it. Let me start by giving you my update. So you guys, the rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. I didn't die. I did have a heart attack last week. Those of you that don't know that, I had a heart attack, and probably I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my wife. Basically, I thought I had pneumonia. I had a silent heart attack. There was no pain, nothing. So I thought everything was fine. I thought I was just getting tired. And I was tired for a couple of weeks, and then for about 3 days, I couldn't get the temperature right. I was either sweating or shivering. And she made me, hey, Timmy, welcome. So she made me go to an urgent care, and I was belligerent about it, being a typical guy, you know, I don't want to be, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm going to live forever. And they kept running more and more tests and couldn't find anything wrong with me. And I was about to walk out because I was tired of taking tests. And they wanted to run one more test on my heart. And I was, no, I've had enough. I'm leaving. And she made me do it. And the heart enzyme that says you're having a heart attack was through the roof. So all of a sudden everybody changed, and they sent me lights and sirens to the hospital, and they put in 2 big stents, like 6-inch stents, went through my wrist. Pretty amazing. So now I'm back. So I'm sure a lot of people in this room have stents. I don't even have stents. Just you and I? That was everybody. Everybody's raised again anyway, just make me feel better. Anyway, okay, I went to the hospital, and next thing you know, I'm lying on the table, and they're putting stents in. I woke up, thank goodness, and now I'm fine. I just got to recover so I'll go to cardiac rehab next week. So I'm going to be fine. You're going to have to put up with me for a lot longer. Thank goodness. And I used to do these meetings every month. I don't know if you guys remember that, years ago. And I haven't done one in forever. So for those of you that don't know the history of the company, I'm going to give you kind of a brief history of where we came from. Then I'm going to show you what I'm teaching today, what makes us different in the world, and show you a few of our recent accomplishments. First thing, this came out of an idea of mine. My background was, I went to Stony Brook. I thought I was going to become pre-med, and then I had a roommate who was an engineering student, and I was more interested in what he was learning than what I was learning. So I kept studying his stuff. So I went in and I went to the guidance counselor and said, I want to switch and become an engineer. But I was kind of deep into pre-med. So I tried to do 2 majors. Well, I had a scholarship, the only way I could go to school. I'm one of 7 kids. My parents didn't have a dime to send me to school. So the only way I went to school was a scholarship. And I didn't even apply for it. It was in New York State, every senior takes a test. And they give the top 5% free tuition at any state school. And somehow I made it in the top 5%. I guessed right. The bottom line is I got a free ride through school, and then I worked my way through. I was a night watchman. I put up TV antennas. I worked as a dishwasher, anything to make money. I chewed water for about 7 years. And when I finished my scholarship, I didn't have any more money, and I didn't finish either major. So I had to go to work. So I worked a couple of years in engineering, and I loved it and hated it at the same time. It was kind of like, because I was the bottom rung of the totem pole, so I was doing the really dumb stuff. I never got to the point where I was really doing engineering. So they said they'd send me back to school. So I said, great. That means I could take off and maybe go back to work if I had failed. So I went back, and instead of taking engineering that they wanted me to take, I finished my pre-med. And I had no way to go to podiatry school. I had no money for that. And then I read the scholarship thing, and there was a scholarship listed called National Health Service Corps. And I said, what is that? So I looked it up, and it said it's based on desire to work in a shortage area. I said, how do they prove that? I said, I could get that scholarship. I'll just prove I have more desire than anybody else. How did I prove it? I had a friend that went to Vanderbilt, and he was close friends with a lady that started the Vanderbilt Student Health Coalition. I said, what is that? They send the medical students, go out to Upper East Tennessee in the mountains, and they give free medical care to people that are really, really poor. So I was the only volunteer in the program. Turns out the director of that program knew the director of the National Health Service Corps, wrote a beautiful letter for me, and got me a scholarship, free ride through medical school. I was under Carter. Carter started the program. And then while I was still in school, Reagan got elected, and the very first thing he did was he canceled the program. No more scholarships. And he didn't even want to pay me when I got out. So they said, just open up practice in a shortage area. I was a bluegrass musician, so I wanted to move to Nashville. And Nashville was a shortage area, so I opened up in Bellevue, and I opened up in Franklin. And the trouble is, everything I was taught about how the foot works flew in the face of everything I was taught in engineering about how physics and engineering work. And I kind of thought that Isaac Newton was right, and that these podiatrists were completely wrong. And so I started experimenting on my patients. And I kept raising the arch little by little, raising it, raising it, raising it. And I took it all the way up to the highest point you could possibly go. And I noticed people started really improving. I could see changes in the way they walked. Because I would buy the most expensive, best orthotics I could. I'd put them in their shoes and I'd watch them walk. And it would look like gait analysis when I was in school. I'd have this patient walking up and down, and it would be like, we'd all stand around and the teacher would say, you see that? You see that? And none of us would see anything. We'd all go, yeah, we see it, right. We'd answered right on the test, but we never saw anything. There was no changes in the way people walked. Well, I started making orthotics in my garage that changed the way people walk. Well, then one day I decided to ask some of my colleagues, or they called me up and said, would you make orthotics for me? So I didn't have any employees, so I hired a few kids out of the high school. They had that thing called co-opting out your senior year. So I had a couple of seniors co-opting out, and we were making orthotics. And we had one room in the garage that was kind of the office. We had 2 rooms where we made orthotics because I had a 3-car separate garage. We stored the casts in the barn. God forbid anybody wanted a second pair. It took us an hour to find the cast because they were in no special order at all. And we were looking through casts, it was horrible. We had no bathroom. We had no water. We literally had to carry buckets of water because we didn't have a milling machine. We poured plaster into every cast and broke it out and smoothed it. We didn't have an oven. We found an old kitchen oven that's supposed to be built into the wall, and we put it on 2x4s. That was our oven. We didn't have a vacuum press. We took a piece of rubber and we pushed it down over the cast, and that's how we formed it. We can only do one at a time. There's only one person in this room that remembers that. Melissa, who was my second employee, is still here. How many years have you been here?
22 in October.
22 years. I never thought I'd have employees. I remember one day, we got 5 pairs of orthotics in, 5 casts in one day. We actually put them down on the floor, and we did the Mexican hat dance around the 5 casts. And then we looked at each other. Could you imagine if we got 5 in every day? That'd be 100 a month. Then we looked at each other and said, what are we, stupid? We're never going to get to 100 a month. What are we doing now, 400 a day? That's crazy. First, I never thought that anything I invented could mean anything, or do anything. I didn't think I had reinvented anything, to be honest with you. It took me years to figure out that I'd actually done something. I didn't know anything about running a manufacturing company. I was a foot doctor. What do I know about running a company? Nobody gave me a business course. I didn't know what a P&L was or a balance sheet. I didn't know anything. I didn't know not to give people benefits, so I just gave all the benefits I could. If we could afford it, I gave it. So just because I didn't know what to do. Nobody told me. Nobody even told me it was about making money. I remember one day I went to the chief operating officer years ago and said, you know, the company is doing pretty well. We have money in the bank. I said, who owns that money? And he said, he's like, you do. It's like, oh, really? What can I do with it? I'll put a gym, I'll put a cafeteria in, I never quite wrapped my head around the idea that any of it belonged to me. Nor did I ever, and to this day, ever wrap my head around the idea that I was anybody's boss. Because nobody would ever listen to me. Why would I be the boss? Heck, at home, she's the boss. She's my boss. She's the boss and I'm nothing, which makes her the boss of nothing. I tell you the truth, I stumbled and I made tons of mistakes. And I screwed up and we moved to a chicken coop for 3 years. And then we discovered after we bought it, we couldn't even put in a septic field. We couldn't have a bathroom. How many of you remember the chicken coop, right? We have still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 people that were still, we entered the chicken coop with 6 employees. 2 years and 8 months later, we had 26. How did we make a toilet? I remembered when I was 18, I bicycled across the United States, and when I hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, I said, how can they put a toilet in the middle of rock? And they had a composting toilet. So I put a composting toilet. You know what that is? It's like having an outhouse in your house. There's no bowl of water, it's a tube. You don't flush it, you take planer shavings. Luckily, there was a cabinet shop in front of the lab where they would give us bags of planer shavings. You'd take a scoop of that and drop it down the toilet. It was a mess. And we lived there. That's why I overcompensated when we moved in here. We have like a zillion toilets in this place because our biggest complaint was we never had a toilet. We had hand washing, but it was cold water. We didn't have water heater. We didn't have walls. I couldn't afford walls like these things. Why couldn't I afford walls? We didn't have any money. I went to a place that made vinyl. And I said, do you have any vinyl that's rejected that you're going to throw out? They said, we've got a whole pallet of it. It has a line down the middle. We're going to throw it out. I said, what do you give me the whole pallet for? And they said, $1 a yard. I said, I'll take the whole pallet. And we just rolled it along the walls and we used roofing nails to hold it up. That was our walls. They're still there, those walls. Had a little tiny office. We had wildlife coming in. I remember one day our chief financial officer, our bookkeeper, was at work and he turns around and there's a skunk in his office. And he's frantically trying to call us in the next room. And we can't hear him. And nobody picks up the phone. He has to sit there waiting for the skunk to wander out of his office. Freaking out that the skunk's gonna spray him. One day, it was raining so hard, there was water running inside the walls. And it was because the gutters were clogged. And we had to go up on the roof and knock, with a sledgehammer, knock the ends off the gutters so the water would shoot out the back of the building. I didn't know anything about electricity, but I put the electricity in myself. When I called the inspector, he said, "You have it all backwards." Fix it. And he's passed me. Somehow he passed me. I had to put the weatherhead in. I didn't know you thread it on the ground and carry it up. I was fighting with this 2-watt wire to get it in. It got out of my hands in the rain and smacked me in the face. Blood was coming down. I had this big black eye. I had to give a lecture the next day with a big black eye. It was crazy. I mean, we had humble beginnings, very humble beginnings. We couldn't hold the building up. So I found baling wire and I bought a baker's stand. And I drilled a hole. I didn't have glasses. I remember drilling the hole. The rust was coming down into my eyes. And I was trying to get it out of my eyes. Every foot I drilled a hole and took baling wire and ran it across this way and across this way to hold the building up. Then I realized I had a grid. I could lay some insulation over it, and maybe it wouldn't be so hot in the summer because we had no air conditioning. It was pretty miserable. So then they came to me, the county came to me and said, "How would you like land in our industrial park?" And they brought a banker, and the banker said, "We'll give you 100% financing." I said, "Good, because I have no money." They built this building right here. This was our front door of the building. And only half the building was built. And in fact, I had a guy come to me for a job. He was a podiatrist, a pet orthopedist, and a certified athletic trainer, and a certified orthotist. 4 degrees. I said, "I can't afford you." He goes, "Please, I saw your lecture. You're the next big thing in orthotics. I want to work for you." I said, "I can't afford you. I'll give you $10 an hour. That's all I could offer you." Well, it turns out with his school loans, he was losing money. I actually raised him up to $12 an hour. And he stayed with me for many years, and he actually built all of these offices with his own 2 hands. He spent 60 days here sleeping in the construction site, no roof half the time, and built all of these offices. Then he went off I gave him stock in the company. I bought it back from him because he wanted to start his own lab competing with me. Not only did I let him out of his contract, but I actually gave him some seed money to help him get started. Because I knew that when I'm standing on the podium, if I'm talking about a product, about a theory that I'm the only one in the world that makes, I'm advertising. You can't advertise from the podium. So if there was even one other person making it, then I could say, "I'm teaching you mass theory, principles of mass posture theory." Because I came up with an entirely new way of looking at biomechanics. When I came along, what I was taught in school, what's still being taught today, is that there's only one axis of the foot that matters. It's the axis between the ankle bone and the heel bone, called the subtalar joint axis. And that everything revolved around that one axis. And I looked back, and I stepped back from the problem, and I said, the foot doesn't have 2 bones. The foot has 26 bones, 35 joints. They wouldn't be there. They weren't all involved in some way in getting us around, in propulsion, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have them. So I said, stop looking at one axis and stand back and look at all of the axes moved together. What are you looking at when you're looking at everything moved at the same time? You're looking at posture. So I came out with the very first postural theory of foot biomechanics. And my job is, I always looked at my job very differently than every other speaker. I go to medical conferences, and the speakers were trying, and this is weird, because these are already pretty bright people, they're doctors, you know, and Their job was to talk over everyone's head. Because their message wasn't what they were saying. Their message was, I'm smarter than you. And I never thought I was smarter than anybody, and I don't think I'm smarter than anybody in this room. I'm really not. But my message was, the subject is simpler than you thought. My message was that anybody can understand biomechanics. It's really easy. And you don't have to take 40 years of it in school, the way I did, and learn things that were baloney. Then I researched what I learned in school, and it turns out it was made up in the shower. There was no facts behind it. There was no data. There was nothing. The guy made it up in the shower. And it became the box outside of which podiatrists, chiropractors, physical therapists would not think for the next 50 years. And I came along with the very first credible challenge to that, saying, if you're going to choose any axis, which you should never do, you should look at them all at the same time. You're going to choose any axis, the one they chose was the worst. How did I prove that it was the worst? Because if you put an axis up and you put a force on this side, you rotate. You put the force on this side, what happens? You rotate the other way. What happens when the force goes right through the axis? Nothing. Nothing. It doesn't rotate. There's no rotation. Turns out, whoever designed the foot was a lot smarter than all of us, and placed that axis in the only orientation that every force entering the foot would pass right through it. So they chose the one axis that would have no effect. And they based all of biomechanics around this axis. So I came along with an idea that was much simpler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give you, very briefly, the lecture I give to doctors. Because let's see if I've made it in layman's terms so that anybody can understand what I'm doing. Firstly, I have to admit at the beginning I'm biased. I'm biased toward Soul Supports. Because that's the company I started. I got us into this mess. So you've got to listen to me for about an hour. About 95% of people, to a greater or lesser degree, have flat feet. They're overpronators, we say. Partly because they might have ligamentous laxity. They could do, this person's extreme. They could be in the Cirque du Soleil. There's a disease called Ehlers-Danlos disease, where the kids in school that can put their feet behind their head and twist into a pretzel. Gravity is bringing us down. That's what causes our feet to collapse. The hard, flat, unvaried terrain we walk on today. We don't walk on earth, we walk on concrete. When do you step off the concrete during the day? Those of you that are hunters go, we go in the woods. That's a good thing. Sedentary lifestyles. I'm guilty. Sedentary lifestyles. We don't exercise enough. We don't get our muscles to support our arms. If you have tight calf muscles, and this is the brilliant work of Santana, who's running the cameras for us. You have tight calves, you pull up on the back of the heel bone, and the heel bone rolls forward and collapses the arch. So tight calves cause pronation. Trauma. How hard do you push on that brake pedal just before impact? Even if you're the passenger. Right? You're pushing enough to break bones. But I had a different theory than everybody else. My theory was, it was our embryologic development that caused us to collapse our arch. The limb buds emerge from the embryo at about 4 to 6 weeks. They come out this way and they start rotating toward the middle. At one point in development, you're praying, which you probably should be if you're coming into this world. Then you start rotating down to the ground. At birth, you're sitting at about 45, 50 degrees inverted. We don't walk at birth. We have 9 to 15 months before we take our first step. So we're rotating rapidly to the ground. At 3.5 years old, you're at 90% of adult position. At 5.5, it's over. This is a 2-day-old baby. One of our employees back years ago brought their baby in at 2 days. We took pictures. And you can see how inverted they are, tilted in. Well, years ago, it was discovered that the posture of the foot, the height of the arch, completely controlled its function. This was discovered in 1896 by this man. He published an article he called Weak Foot. And everybody laughed at the term weak foot, but it's actually a brilliant idea. Because everyone that measured feet was measuring it from the ground up. And he was saying it's how much it drops from its highest point. Does it drop enough to weaken the foot structure? Because the foot changes its function. When the arch goes up, the foot becomes rigid. All the bones nest into each other. The ligaments tighten up. The foot becomes a solid structure. So when you pull on the back, you have a lever at the ankle axis and propel forward. So you propel forward because your foot is rigid. As it drops, though, your foot untwists and elongates and becomes flatter, and it becomes floppy. Why does it do that? Because we're designed to walk on Earth, and Earth is an irregular surface. So it allows us to adjust to the shape of the terrain and absorb shock by hitting this spongy foot. Well, this was further proven by this man, Merton Root, who is truly the father of foot biomechanics. And Merton Root invented what became the standard of foot biomechanics that nobody would move outside of. He called it neutral position. Right before he died, he was interviewed by Dr. Lee. It was a 150-page article. And he said, and I quote, "All of a sudden, the concept of sub-talar joint neutral position flashed into my mind. That turned out to be the key to my being able to contribute to podiatry. And he gave us neutral position. And when I was in school, the seniors taught the juniors in clinic. One day my senior pulls me aside and he says, "I'll teach you all of foot biomechanics in one sentence." I said, "I'm all ears." He said, "Cast them in neutral and make an orthotic." That was the answer to everything. No matter what you examined, what your findings were, that was the answer to everything. Cast them in neutral. And neutral was a middle point between fully raising the arch and fully collapsing it. It was kind of in the middle. It turns out the joint we were talking about only moves 6 degrees when you walk. And the accuracy when you feel it, try to feel it, is plus or minus 3. So doctors were just deluding themselves into thinking that they were finding neutral, when in fact they could find anywhere within its range of motion and call it neutral. So neutral was a crazy idea. Anyway, here's the way I looked at it. I looked at it like the foot is a tented structure. Isn't it? It's a structure that goes up in the middle. And what does it experience? It experiences a downward force. A downward force due to gravity. So, luckily for me, the answer was quite simple. The force is, the deforming force is down. What's the corrective force? Up. That's it. That was the answer. The trouble is, everyone was letting the foot starting their correction so low. They were letting the foot drop. So when they tried to raise the arch, what happened was it hurt. Why did it hurt? Because the foot was dropping down and hitting the orthotic with every step. So they were getting pain in the arch. They couldn't stand it. So they would hand it back to the doctor, and they'd send it back to the lab. They'd have a big warranty cycle till finally the patient said, "I'm tired of this," threw them in the trash. That's what orthotics were. And occasionally, so they kept lowering the arch till they were comfortable. And they lowered them so low, eventually, that they were almost as low as the arch could go. Almost at the end of the range of motion. So how did they work when they did work? And sometimes they did. How did they work? At the end of the range of motion, your ligaments are slowing you down. You finally hit the orthotic, and when you hit it, you begin to compress your own soft tissues in your arch. And compressing those soft tissues acted like a dampening. It's like the bumper on your car. If you're going at low velocity, you hit another car, what happens? The bumper absorbs the impact. No damage. If you're going faster, though, you get damage. If you're going even faster, you could get into a lot of damage. You see cars, not every car doesn't get damaged when you're in an accident, right? They get damaged because the bumper doesn't solve the problem if you're going over 5 miles an hour. Well, what happened is you were slowing down at the end due to your ligaments tightening up, then you hit the orthotic, then you compressed the soft tissues, and it dampened the impact. And you know what a symptom is? A symptom in our line of work, in biomechanics, is when micro trauma occurs faster than your ability to heal. If you can heal faster than the damage, you don't notice it. If you don't heal faster, the damage becomes a symptom. You go, I have plantar fasciitis. That's a symptom. Symptom of flat feet. So what we were able to do with the flat orthotics was to take you from just above that threshold to just below it. We could mask a symptom, but we couldn't change the way you walk. I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to change the way people walk. So what Root said, the foot unlocks when it collapses, and it locks when the arch is raised, when you go into toe up. Why do we rotate around the subtalar joint? Another great animation, thank you, Santana. We slide the heel bone, the ankle bone back on the heel bone. Now that the front of the ankle bone is sitting on the heel bone, it can't rotate around the heel bone. So when it can't rotate and you pull on your calf muscle, you have no choice but to rotate around the ankle bone. In other words, rotate at the ankle axis and propel forward. So that slight 6-degree motion was like a window latch. How does a window latch work? When the windows become even, the latch can come over and lock the window. When the front of the heel bone is flat, the ankle bone can go over and lock the joint, basically. Prevent it from rotating. That alone was a massive discovery, and I discovered that by going to the Smithsonian Institute and doing research on their bones. The Smithsonian has the best collection of bones in the world, and you know who they belong to? You. Because you pay taxes. They're your bones. So you can go play with them. You can go behind the exhibits and play with the bones. You just got to convince one guy, the collections manager, a guy named David Hunt. So what's the biggest thing we treat? Is plantar fasciitis. As the arch drops, this ligament is pulled tightly when the arch drops and it rips. It either rips where it attaches to the heel bone, or it rips in its full length. That's the full length is plantar fasciitis. When it rips at the where it attaches, we call it a heel spur because it forms a little bony spur on X-ray. It has nothing to do with the pain. The spur is a late artifact on X-ray. But we blame it because we could point to it on an X-ray. Plantar fasciitis. Why do people get plantar fasciitis? Because this bone here changes the direction of pull of the fascia to horizontal. So you've got an axis of motion where the big first ray is going up and down, the first metatarsal. You could drop a perpendicular to a line of force. Force times perpendicular distance is torque. Have you ever seen a torque wrench? The longer the wrench, the easier it is to turn, because there's a bigger distance. Short wrench is really hard to turn, because there's not a lot of distance. Well, what happens when the arch drops? The distance decreases. To get the same propulsion, you have to increase the tension on the fascia. And you increase it enough to rip it. And that's what causes, that's about 70% of the reason that we make orthotics is because of this. Without plantar fasciitis, we wouldn't exist. But I looked at this motion that we're trying to control, and I said, that's not a rotation around one joint. That's a change in posture. One person walks into a chiropractor's office like this, and their twin brother walks in like this. Who's going to have neck pain? The guy who's got his head hanging forward. Why? Because it takes 12 pounds to support your head when you're straight. It takes 42 pounds when you move it 3 inches forward. That's a big strain on your neck. Posture controls function. So we have this tented structure experiencing an intermittent downward force. So how do you fix it? You got to do a push-up. You push up in the upward direction. The question is, how much force? Oh, wrong force. This force. How much force do you apply? How much force should you apply? And that's why nobody else ever did this. The answer turned out to be Newton's second law. Remember Newton's second law? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Let me show you an example. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. We have a saying in medicine, form follows function. What does that mean? It means if you function a certain way, you become that way. Remember the movie Young Frankenstein? Where he says, walk like this? Well, if you walk like that, that'll become your gait cycle. That will become the way you walk every day. Because your function will determine your form. Same thing with hammer toes. If you walk around like this, you become like this. When I heard that, I said, every deformity we treat starts out flexible, over time becomes rigid. When do you want to treat it? When it's flexible, when you can move it. Everybody else is waiting until it's rigid, because then the patient's willing to go under the knife and get surgery. Well, we were taught it only goes in one direction. It goes in the direction of disease, deformity, pain, disability. But that's not the way it goes. It goes the other way. If you change the way a person functions, their deformities go away, their pain goes away, their disability goes away. They become better. In fact, this is the way the album cover actually is. This way. So you can reverse hammer toes. You can reverse bunions by changing the way someone functions. And we've now proven that. Another tenet of this theory is full contact. Why? Full contact is like a hug. It feels good. Full contact, when I went to school, they had just come out with this. The full contact cast for diabetic ulcers. I was shocked. I raised my hand and go, how can you put rigid material right up against the delicate skin of a diabetic? And the answer with 3 words. No hot spots. If there's no areas of concentration of force, you're not going to have pain. So what do? Well, in a regular person, non-diabetic, hot spots are pain. In a diabetic, it can get much worse. I don't mean to show you that before lunch. Doctors don't mind that for some reason. A hug is comfort. It feels good to be in full contact. Why? Because it evenly distributes the force of the body throughout the entire bottom of the foot. That allows us to apply a much greater corrective force without hurting the patient. It's like having the world molded to you with every step you take for the rest of your life. That's what we do. People said, your orthotics cost what? $600? You know, when they go to the doctor, that's what they charge. We don't charge anywhere near that. Big profits on their side. They go, the doctor would say, well, what's the last time you bought tires on your car? And how long are they going to last? To change every step you take for the rest of your life, it's worth it. And when I went into this, there were 2 kinds of orthotics. There was accommodative, which was soft and cushy, and there were rigid orthotics with a tilt. They tilted the ground a few degrees this way. I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Truth is, mass posture, soul support, is the most accommodative in the world, because accommodative in physics means an even distribution of force. We accomplish that. Functional means change in the gait cycle, which is completely dependent on posture. We're the first orthotic ever to change posture of the foot. Nobody else would do it. So we're simultaneously the most accommodative and the most functional orthotic in the world. Like I said, it's like the bumper on your car. Faster you go. So the old orthotics work by letting the foot drop down and dampen the impact. This is supposed to work. Maybe it's not working. There it is. Right in my hand. With sole supports, there is no impact. Why? You don't have to drop down and hit the orthotic. You're already on it. You're touching it. In fact, we go further than the highest arch you can go by evenly compressing the soft tissues the way they'll be when you stand on it. So let's look at our simple machine, our push-up. A good machine to raise that would look like this. What does that look like? An arch. It looks like a spring. To me, as a simple machine, I'd say that's a spring. But what if you didn't make it like that? What if you actually shaped it to the thing you're trying to support? Wouldn't that be cool? That's what we did. We shaped it to the bottom of the foot. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. It was right next to the wheel. It's the leaf spring. If you look at a leaf spring and you look at a foot orthotic, they're the same thing. There's no gears. There's no electronics in it. It's a bent piece of plastic. So I said, we need to be able to adjust the spring constant. In other words, adjust the resistance, the downward force. How do you do that? I tried to calculate it because I had all this engineering knowledge. I thought maybe I could figure it out. You could calculate till you're blue in the face. And you know what happened? You'll never figure it out. You know why? There's too many variables. Then somebody told me a story about an old engineer and a young engineer. There's an old engineer working at a plant for many years, and then a young engineer comes in right out of school. And the old guy says to the young guy, "How much coal is in that bin?" The young guy goes over and takes all these measurements, comes back 3 days later with pages of calculations. He says, "I'll show you how much coal is in the bin." And the old guy looks at him funny and says, "There's little marks on the inside of the bin." So you could calculate it or you could just measure it. Well, it took us 9 years to figure out how to measure it. What finally was we had an engineer here who left and died, Bill Boers, and he had come up with all these different contraptions. Then one day I was helping my son with his physics homework, and he was studying Pascal's law. Remember that? Scratching me some high school brain cells back there. Pascal's law says pressure inside of an enclosed container is equivalent in all directions. And I didn't realize that we didn't enclose the container. So we built one that was enclosed. And we blew up a bladder over the orthotic. And every 2,000ths of an inch we measured how much pressure it took to move it. So we developed a force curve on every orthotic. Then we had to figure out how does that relate to body weight? How does it relate to foot flexibility? So we plotted it against body weight and foot flexibility, the slopes of the force curves. And we had two simultaneous algebraic equations for two variables. Remember 11th grade algebra? I didn't. I didn't remember any of it. So I called the Vanderbilt University Biomedical Engineering Department. They sent 4 or 5 interns, and they spent the summer figuring it out. They got an A, and I got the formula. That was a good deal for me. We invented our first calibrator, and it was a digital encoder, a bladder. Now we're doing it this way, optically. We shoot out up at the same bladder, and we see it on the screen, and using LabVIEW National Instruments, we got it much more accurate. When we went to digital first calibrator, our warranties dropped 90%. Warranties will eat you alive in this business. You could put your warranties on one hand and your profits on the other. When your warranties go up, you lose. You can't stay in business. When your warranties go down, you stay in business. Well, we have the lowest warranty rate in the industry by far. What are we down to, Ken?
Around 2%.
2%. I almost bought Langer's Canadian operation till I found out their warranty rate was 25%. You can't survive that way. No wonder they wanted to sell it. We have a 2% warranty rate. Then, about 3 years ago, I was invited to speak at Fort Bragg. Not at Fort Bragg, I was at the North Carolina Podiatric Medical. The podiatrists from Bragg were in the audience. They came up to me afterwards, and one of them was a triathlete. Lady had been taking 6 ibuprofen a day for her pain, running and swimming and bicycling, for 11 years. And that's a recipe for losing your kidneys and liver. I looked at her problems, I said, Soul Supports will fix that in 10 days. She said, BS. I said, oh, you're going to challenge me? I pushed her feet in the foam. 10 days later, she was pain-free. I get a call from the chief of the residency director at Bragg, Dr. Asim Raja. And he says, would you come to Bragg and lecture, teach our attendings and our residents, and while you're here, would you treat the 5 worst cases of foot pain in the U.S. Special Forces? I said, Special Forces? Give me 25. Your 5 worst are probably so broken they can never be fixed. He goes, okay, you're on, 25. Each one of them came in suffering for 10 to 15 years with the kind of pain I wouldn't even stand up. They'd have to wheel me around in a wheelchair. And they start every day with a 12-mile march with an 80-pound pack. Then a full day of the most intense physical training you could imagine. I wouldn't last one day. I'd have had my heart attack at 20. If that happened. Well, what happened? I made each one a pair for their body weight uniform and a pair for their body weight uniform and pack. And then I kept my fingers crossed. 3 weeks later, I get a text. You don't get much information from Special Forces. I get a text saying, every one of them has returned to active duty. These people were being med-boarded out of the service. At a cost of $1 million apiece to train. Service was going to lose $25 million losing these guys. They were all back to full active duty, and they said, most information I could get out was they were all very satisfied. That was it. And by the way, would you supply Fort Bragg? So I said, sure. I couldn't figure out the insurance. We could not figure it out. So about 100 pairs in, they came to me and said, you can't keep giving us orthotics for free. I said, well, these people are putting their life on the line for us. Why should I skimp on them, of all people? Yes. And so finally, Dr. Raja was so upset about it, he went off base and he found a company called Tactical Rehab and said, if you'll use Soul Supports, we'll send you all our business. Instantly, they became our biggest customer. Next thing, Lejeune wanted them. 9 trips to Lejeune later, they were our biggest customer. Then Pendleton, Lemoore, Madigan, Bremerton, Langland, Lackley, Quantico, Fort Hood, Fort Sam Houston, Fort Lee, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Tripler, Schofield, Pearl Harbor, Okinawa. We picked up about 20 some military bases. It's now become about 20% of our business is the military and growing through the roof. It's what I'm most proud of, helping the people that help us. Trouble is, they came back to me about 4 months, 5 months later and said, we're having a problem. They don't always wear an 80-pound pack. Personally, I knew that loading demands varied because of this. Pregnancy. People had asked me for years, what do I do for pregnancy? Patient's pregnant, do I make it for their pre-pregnant weight plus 35? Do I make it for their pre-pregnant weight? What do I do? And I would always say, well, I guess you got to make it for their pre-pregnant weight, or I'd say add a few pounds and we'll recalibrate, seeing how much they lost afterwards. I didn't know what to do. But then they said there are days that they don't wear a pack. They don't have any pack on. There are days that they have a 40-pound pack. Then there are days like this. You notice this person, not only is carrying somebody, they have a knife in their hand. They're going to kill you. While they're holding somebody. It's absolutely amazing what these people can do. But the day biomechanists like myself dread look like this. This thing on top weighs 50 pounds. That's a steel mortar base. It takes 3 people to carry a mortar. One carries the base, one carries the mortar, one carries the ammo, and he's also carrying ammo. This pack weighs more than the soldier. For the men, it ruins their low back permanently. For the women, it fractures their pelvis. We're going to be working on that problem in the future. We're going to see if we can fix that. But how do I change the calibration on an orthotic so that they don't have to carry 5 different pairs with them and remember which pair was which? Within 2 weeks, you guys, and Keith was correct. Keith, Ty, and Ken came up with the leaf in 2 weeks. That really made me look good to the military. They presented us with a problem and we have a solution in 2 weeks. It blew me away. The leaf changed everything. One of the few things we have patented in this company, it's patent pending right now. When we have a pregnant leaf, 30 pounds, plus or minus 10, a 50-pound plus or minus 20, and a 100-pound plus or minus 30. So we have, when we do pairs for the military, they get a field pair and a garrison pair. Garrison is when they're on base, field is when they're out in the field. The field pair is a heavy-duty pair, and then which is 50 pounds higher, plus they could go another 130. So they can carry 180 pounds in addition to their body weight, and still get the benefit of the orthotic. This allowed us to do something new, because we're the Rolls-Royce of orthotics. The rest of the world charges between about $85 wholesale and maybe $125. Few labs charging in the 140s. We're $149. Why are we the most expensive? Because we're the Rolls-Royce. If you're a Rolls-Royce dealer, believe it or not, you charge more for your cars than if you're a Yugo dealer. You pay more for them too. You have to calibrate this. You don't have to calibrate any other orthotic. So I have to give credit where it's due. Same people came up with Soulmates. What is Soulmates? It's the Chevy. It's the one that everybody can drive. Because instead of 149, it goes for 89. What's the difference? We use a thinner shell that's not calibrated, and then we add leaves. In a way, it's adjustable, unlike Soul Support, which has a minimum of your body weight. This one goes even lower if you want it, and can go higher by changing leaves. So the Soulmates was a way to put mass posture into the hands of more people that couldn't afford because doctors, we charge $149, we have people charging between $550 and $800 for our product. You can see where the money is on that side of it. So this is what we're trying to control. The only problem we have had, and this is the Danger Will Robinson. Anyone remember that? Lost in Space? I'm really dating myself. Those of you less than 60 probably don't remember that. Our problem has been break-in. It's such an aggressive orthotic, people have difficulty breaking it in. Why? Because walking is a learned, repetitive muscle firing. You don't think about it, you just walk. You fire those muscles without thinking. Well, here's an example. These are many of the muscles that are fired. They vary a little bit with each step, but not a whole lot. They're pretty much the same pattern. They fire at the same time. They do the same thing over and over. Established muscle firing patterns resist change. In other words, when you put a big piece of plastic in the arch, they still fire the muscles. Well, what muscles do they fire to try to raise their arch. The ones on the bottom of the foot that try to shorten to raise the arch. Well, they're firing right up against the orthotic. When you push, when you block that motion, you get hot spots. It hurts. So our orthotics hurt. Our old solution was, we'll hold your hand while you get used to it. Add an hour a day, add a half an hour a day, until you can finally get used to the orthotics. But what if there was a reset button? You could push a button and erase the muscle firing pattern. Turns out there is. I have to give credit where it's due. Firstly, the guy who put those reset buttons in, or a gal that did it, it wasn't me. Secondly, a massage therapist named Arik Gold, and he was visiting here one time, you remember? He came up to me at the end of one of my lectures and said, I get people used to your orthotics like that. I said, BS. He showed me it worked on everybody. Well, his technique has some side effects. It's 15 points if you touch them very lightly. All of a sudden, full range of motion returns to the area you're working on. That's a positive side effect. The other side effect is that all pain in the area disappears, almost permanently. You could take away pretty much anyone's pain. And he developed it for the foot and then the entire body. So Mark and I went into business together for a year, and then he decided he didn't want to do it. And I said, what do? I had invested quite a bit of money into it. He said, whatever you want to do. I'll sign it over to you. So he did. Now I have it. I call it Relax, Release, Relief. I'm now teaching this all over the world. I put it online for anybody that wants to learn it. I made the foot free so that people that use our product can get people used to it instantly. Not have to pay anything to train. And all the rest of the body, I divided into 8 sections. Again, with the help of Santana and Greg. We divided it into 8 sections, and I charge $5. Why $5? I based it on my wife's Starbucks. I said, I'm going to make it cheaper than my wife's Starbucks. So
Now we move to the side of the foot to relax and release the ankle.
This is an
The
excellent
relaxation point is on the side of the foot in the indicated position.
But that guy is me.
With the other hand, grasp the top of the foot gently between the fingers and thumb and turn it slightly inward and down as shown. Feel for the soft fascia under the foot and move upward till you feel the bone under your finger. Now curl your finger gently under the bone and, keeping the foot turned inward and downward, pull in an upward direction gently with your fingers for about 30 seconds. As shown in this example, we use a pencil with an eraser.
2 audios going on?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's an excerpt. You can go to www.rrrtv.net and scroll down, that's for free. You can learn how to relieve foot pain. With that, there's no break-in at all with our orthotic. So the major obstacle to our growth is now gone. We can now get people used to our product instantly. What does this mean? When you can erase muscle firing patterns and return full range of motion, someday this will replace stretching completely. There's no reason to stretch when you could release it and gain full range of motion instantly. What if you're a golfer and you keep doing the same thing wrong every time? What if you could erase the wrong muscle firing and then follow the instructions of your instructor and do it perfectly and record a new muscle firing pattern? What if you could do that in pitching? What if you could do that in every sport? It's going to change athletic training forever. It's going to change the field of pain relief. I went to pain medicine doctors and I said, how would you like to learn how to do this? I'll teach you for free. They said, not interested. Not interested, don't even show us. Why? Their model is trading prescriptions for opioids for insurance reimbursements. They're not interested in you being pain-free. They don't want you to be pain-free. You're the goose that laid the golden egg. You're going to give them $350 every 2 weeks for the rest of your life so you can get pain medicine. That's the basis of the opioid crisis. That's why we have an opioid crisis. 20 years ago, 5% of people entering rehab came from prescription drugs. Now it's 95% prescription drugs. Then when your scripts run out and they cut you off, you're looking for pain relief, you go to heroin, or you go to street drugs, or you buy somebody else's prescriptions. And that's why we are having 30,000 people a year in our country die of overdose. We could solve that problem by getting rid of the underlying cause, which is the pain. Wouldn't that be sweet? A lot of implications to this. So the takeaway is posture controls function. You want to control function so that you're treating the underlying cause of the disease, not the symptom. You want to decrease pain, reverse deformity, and prevent injury, and improve performance. This was a study done on our product at Georgia State University, showing we decrease how much your center of gravity goes left to right. This study at McMaster University on soul supports shows that we decrease the vertical travel of the center of gravity. Why is that important? When you run, your nose goes up and down 4 inches every step. At the end of a marathon, you have climbed 6.5 World Trade Centers. Your energy has gone vertical, not horizontal. If we can decrease the vertical travel, you'll have more endurance. You'll be faster, and you'll last longer. You'll run further. Military loves this. Increased performance. Relax, release, relief is the key to our future growth in many ways, as is soulmates.
Sorry, losing my mind.
It's okay.
Giselle.
Yep.
You have
Let me just stop this a second.
history of mine.
So,
This lady is Giselle Rodriguez. She's the wife of an outfielder from the Tampa Bay Rays, just traded to some other baseball team. She's been, I think, 14 years now in Major League Baseball, a long time. She was in a car accident. Her husband was driving and broke her tibia, her femur, and ripped her Achilles tendon. They concentrated on the bone. When the cast came off, they discovered the Achilles tendon was torn. They repaired that. She spent 1 year in excruciating pain. Nothing helped her. She was seeing a physical therapist 3 times a week for the whole year. They called her in to see me. I met her at the PT clinic. In 8 minutes, I took her from pain level 6, because it was a good day. On a bad day, when it was raining, it was 9. So it was 6 to 9. Most of the time, it was 7 or 8. So I had caught her on a good day. Pain level 6, down to 1.5 instantly. It was 8 minutes. Then she got her soul supports. The second she stood up in the soul supports, she was completely pain-free. Then they said, we have a lady with 9 years of pain level 9. They brought her in. I got her in 8 minutes down to pain level 1. As soon as her soul supports arrived, she's at 0. We're being able to take patients now, and I kept asking myself, of all the people on earth, why would God show this to me through art, but why would they show this to me? The reason is I had the other half of the answer. Half of the answer is breaking the pain cycle. The other half is raising the arch. It turns out that when ligaments stretch, they cause a positive feedback loop that perpetuates pain. When you push them together and bend the ligament very gently, with the pressure you put on your own eye, the pain goes away. The same ligament that caused the pain cures it. Now I've taken dozens and dozens of cases of the most painful disease in the world, they call the suicide disease, and fibromyalgia. And I put them in remission. Some of them going on 3 and 4 years now. We've done some amazing things with this. This will be, in the future, and I know this is a word that's not used a lot in medicine, this will, in the future, will probably be the the cure of fibromyalgia. So basically, these are the points of the foot. I teach them at my lecture. There's 15 points. You barely touch them. Once again, Santana's done some amazing work here, embedding the bones into the body. And all those points you can find for free online at RRR TV. So what I do now is kind of cocky. I stand up in front of huge groups of doctors and I say, anyone feeling any pain? And somebody comes up right on stage, and I've never seen them before in my life. And I ask them how much pain, how long. In 10 years of pain level 9, and in 8 minutes, I take them out of pain. I take them completely out of pain in front of everyone. Do I have a 5-year double-blind, randomized controlled clinical trial? No. What? But you know what? We're working on it. We have a group in Colorado and a group in Pennsylvania that are going to do a multi-center study on it under my direction, that we're going to have published data. I published the technique itself recently in the Foot and Ankle online quarterly. The Foot and Ankle quarterly was devoted last issue to foot biomechanics. And they did an invitational to the top biomechanists in the world to each write an article about their theory. They asked me. They said 2,500 words, everybody else followed it. I wrote 12 pages. I think I wrote 1,200 words. And they published every bit of it, including RRR. So it's now in the literature. I'm very proud of this. That teaches our entire theory, and it's free online. And I wrote it so that anyone could understand it, not in medical jargon. One of the big problems, I told you, with plantar fasciitis is tight gastrocs. I went to a lecture recently. You know what they do for that today? You know the leaders behind your knee? The big tendons? They stick a knife in right behind the tendon and just cut it on both sides. They call it a gastroc recession. They do it to about 29% of the bunionectomies done in the northwest of this country, in Seattle area. 29% of people get their gastrocs cut. And they showed that they can get an increase of 15 degrees of dorsiflexion, of lifting the toes up toward the knee. 15 degrees. I walk up and I say, anyone here have tight gastrocs? The guy comes up, he couldn't even get to 5 degrees below even. You should do at least 10 above, but he couldn't get to 5 below. I released his gastrocs, 2 minutes. He increased by 25 degrees. I said, nobody needs to cut another gastroc. This lasts forever. And the release point is in the patellar tendon. You push slightly across on the knee. The person bends their knee, bends their foot, you hold it in position. They try to do the opposite motion while you press, and they get a permanent, dramatic increase in their range of motion. People come up to me with frozen shoulders. 10 minutes later, they have full range of motion. I was on a fishing trip called Fishing Docks for CME. In Alaska, a guy couldn't turn his head more than 10 degrees in either direction. I said, turn to one side. I put my hand here. I said, push lightly. The release point is right here on the chest. Press very lightly. First time I did it, he moved 40 degrees. Second time, 90. Every day he walked up to me, 90, 90. I said, it's going to last forever. He said, I spent $30,000 over 10 years going to the top specialists in the United States trying to get this fixed, and nobody could even find the cause, let alone improve it slightly. And you fixed it in 2 minutes? For nothing? I said, you gotta pay it forward. You gotta make somebody else better. So another guy walks up to me, from the trip, he says, I can barely walk. My surgeon took a tumor out of my foot 4 years ago, and it's still killing me. I said, thank goodness he got the tumor out, right? He goes, yeah, it's saved my life. But bottom line is, I'm in terrible pain. I said, take your shoe off. 8 minutes later, he's been pain-free. Turns out he owns the largest furniture store in Milwaukee. So he said, what do you want? You want a couch? You want a chair? I said, I don't want anything. I don't want anything. I wanted to make you better, and I did. That's what I wanted. Because what are we here for anyway?
We
make people better. Come on, you can do better than that. What do we do here?
We make people better.
That's what we're about. That's who we are. We are about one thing. We make people better. We're not about, it's never been about business to me because I never understood business. I suck at business. Thank goodness Ken's good at it. Because I really suck at it. I couldn't wrap my head around business. So when do we use this? At dispensing the orthotics.
Jesus, good to see you.
This is my, let me go back here. Great guy. This is my guy who does my lawn in Florida. And I see him limping outside. I go, Jesus, come here. And he limps over. I said, your feet are hurting. He goes, yeah, really bad. He always calls me sir. Really bad, sir. I said, how bad? He goes, terrible. I said, how's your first step in the morning? He said, terrible. I said, come in. I pushed his feet in the foam. I sent the orthotics here. I made him a pair of orthotics. When I'm dispensing, I'm about to give him the orthotics, and I said, hey, before I give you these, let me relax your foot. Make it easier for you to get used to it. So I start talking to him while I'm, right before, I said, so how long have you been hurting? He said, 5 years. He goes, on a 1 to 10, how bad is it? He said, all the way to 10. I said, how often? He goes, all the time. 24 hours a day. He's 10 out of 10 pain in both feet, 24/7. That's horrible. How could you live like that? I pushed on his feet. He stood up. He goes, you know, now I'm a 5, maybe a 4. And I said, where does it still hurt? And he keeps dancing. I go, what part of your foot is it still hurting? He goes, well, maybe the ball and a little bit of the toes. He said, oh, okay. So I start talking to him about stuff to do in the yard. When we're all done, I realized I didn't get his consent to put this on the screen. So I stopped him on the way out, and I filmed him, and I said, do I have your consent to show this anywhere I want? Put it online, do anything. He goes, sure, anything you want. I said, so let me confirm this again. You came in at a pain level 10. What are you now? He goes, you know, I said 4. He goes, now is nothing. No pain. You give them at dispensing orthotics, there's no breaking, and when they first stand up, you're out of pain. What a difference. I saw him 4 months later. I see him every week when I'm in town. 4 months later, I see him, I said, how's your feet? He goes, not only are my feet still pain-free, but the orthotics have fixed my knees, my hips, and my low back. I have no pain at all in my whole body. Can you help my dad? I said, sure, bring him on over. People now come to my house, knock on the door, in excruciating pain, and they leave 3 or 4 hours later pain-free. You know how much they get charged? Nothing. Nothing. It's not about money. It never has been. Relax, release, relief is going to change the future. So let me tell you where the future is going. When I went to school, you graduate medical school, you pick up your suitcase, walk as far as you wanted, and open an office. So basically everybody had a private practice. You don't go to private practices anymore, you go to medical conglomerates. Giant 350 doctor companies. And the decision about orthotics is not made by the individual doctor anymore. It's made by the accountant in the accounting department that says, Nothing wrong with accountants, I like accountants. But you know what? They're looking for the cheapest thing they can buy, and we're not the cheapest thing. So we have to change our model. And once again, Ken, who all was involved in the new casting?
In the proposal casting or the
No,
last?
the last.
And these ideas are kind of a combination of ideas we've been trying in the past, but we didn't have the technology. Now we have the technology and we're trying to pull all this stuff back together, things Keith worked on, and things Ty's worked on, other people worked on. We're just now at a point where I think we can do something.
Once again, thank you guys, thank you. They've come out with a way of casting the foot without a foam box. What does that mean? It means we can now put our product into a retail setting. Like, you walk into Walmart, there's a machine, you've seen it, right? And you balance yourself, and you get the thing in the middle, and it takes, what does it get? It captures the two-dimensional force distribution when the foot is in its worst posture. What does that tell you about how high the arch should be? Nothing. It's useless. So the whole thing is bogus. It's smoke and mirrors to try to convince you to buy a $50 prefab or a $75 prefab. That's garbage. He said, what if we make a kiosk that makes a real orthotic? Not only better than any commercially available non-medical orthotic in the world, but better than what 95% of podiatrists are doing. What if we gave them a Solning? And at the same time, instead of costing $600, it costs $180, $179. Suddenly, mass posture is available for everyone in the world. So as soon as we get this ready, we're going to approach some of the big box stores. We'll go up to Target, for example, and say, you know, people are buying online, as you well know. Amazon is eating your lunch. You need a reason for people to come to the box store. What if they were coming to the box store to get the best orthotics available in the world for a whole lot less money? That would be pretty amazing. So that's where we're going to go, thanks to you guys. You saved the day in the thing we've been saving. You know, because changes in the way our culture delivers medicine. And we have to be prepared for Medicare for all. There will be Medicare for all. So you're going, Medicare for all? I'm against that. Well, I'll tell you something. We pay about $500,000 a year for your health insurance. One time they accidentally sent me what they paid out. You know what it was? About 40% of what we paid. About $200,000. And you know what they were going to do? Raise my rates 22%. When they made 60% of the money. So the administrative cost of health insurance by the insurance company is 60%. You know what it costs to run Medicare? 3%. You know why? Because the CEO of Medicare makes $150,000 a year. About, maybe $200,000. You know how much the CEO of United Healthcare makes? He also makes $150,000 an hour. An hour. What the hell can you do in an hour that's worth $150,000? And can you do it every hour? The highest earning CEO in America is a drug company. One of these drug companies that charges 10 times more than the drug sells for in Canada. Makes $990 million. That's $500,000 an hour. An hour. So where's your health insurance premium go? To buy this guy his 10th mansion and his 16th yacht and take him on a whirlwind vacation all over the world That's where your money's going. To say that we can't pay for Medicare for all, that's ridiculous. It's like saying, I'm going to give you a 60%, 57% discount. You go, I can't afford it. I can't afford saving 57%. I got to pay 100%. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know who does get free medical care in this country? The military, the VA, old people, poor people, Medicaid, child health insurance program. Everybody gets Medicare for all except the people paying for it, the people in this room. You're the only people that don't get it. You know, we're 37th in the world in healthcare in America. 37th in every major criteria. Infant mortality, things like that, infection rates, cure rates, everything. We're 37th. You know, you fix healthcare, you do what number 1 does. What number 1 does, the top 25 do. It's basic healthcare for everybody. And then if you want, you could buy supplemental insurance for your private room and your bunionectomy. If that's what you want, you could buy it. That's what everybody else does. Want to fix healthcare? How easy is it? Do what number 1 does. That's all. Medicare for all makes sense. So it's going to happen because it's a savings. It's not going to happen because the government loves you. It's going to happen because it saves them money. Because employers save money. That's why. As if they need to save any more money. So we got to look at it, at what Medicare for all is going to do. You know what Medicare pays on orthotics? The only way Medicare pays for orthotics is if you are diabetic and you've had an ulcer, or you have an active ulcer, or you have such bad circulation your foot's going to fall off, go gangrenous. That's when they pay for orthotics. And we don't want them in our orthotics then. Because our orthotics is so aggressive, that patient's too delicate to wear our orthotic. So you know something? We'd be out of business if there's Medicare for all. So we're planning for the future. We want to be the orthotics lab that gets in early. It's like the way we scan the foot using the Structure IO. You've seen that? We have a device that costs $379, goes on an iPad, scans the cast and sends it to us. We just found a way, through a brilliant group of guys up in San Francisco, to scan the cast with an iPhone 10. Now our new program, any iPhone 10 can do it. And we're now working on a camera system because an iPhone does too much. It's an iPhone, for God's sakes. It does everything. We want a device that just does, we want a one-trick pony that just does three-dimensional imaging. We could do that for about $50 instead of $1,200. So we're going to be able to develop a device that will go into all of these shoe stores all over the country, like golf stores and running stores, and any specialty sports store, any kind of store, the hiking stores, REI. There's such a market for this right now. And we're head and shoulders above everybody else. Randomized controlled clinical trials at Georgia State University place us, sole supports, 61% better mechanically, not subjectively, not in somebody's opinion, measurable mechanical change, 61% better than the best orthotic ever made. And that was in '99. We've come a long way in 20 years. We would beat the best now by quite a bit more. I don't know how much, but quite a bit more. We make the best orthotics in the world. Right here. So if whatever you do for this company, if you're a grinder, if you're opening boxes, you're the best at it in the entire world. Because you make the best orthotics in the world. You have made a dream come true for me. I went into this to make people better. And every year you make about 65,000 people better. I want to turn that into millions. and go worldwide. So I'm not just back for my heart attack, I'm back with passion to make this thing bigger and better than ever before. And this company is not about me. It's never been about me. And it's never going to be about me. It's going to be about you. You're the people that make the change in people's lives. Nothing I do, actually, people pay for it. People don't pay me to speak. I do it because I want my theory to be out there. What you do, people pay for it, not what I do. So ultimately, I'm disposable, really. My goal is to make myself completely disposable. Because one thing you realize when you have a heart attack is that you might not be here tomorrow. And you know what? I'm ready to meet my maker. I've lived a great life. I'm so thankful and grateful to have had a chance to make people better. That's who I am. And you guys have given me that chance. So my message to you is thank you. I'm grateful to be alive. And I'm grateful to each and every one of you. You make people better. I just blab about it. Thank you guys so much. Can I have another minute? Because I don't know, most of you know that I'm a Yucaholic. And not everybody comes to the Christmas party. So I would like to share my passion with you. I'm a serious Yucaholic. There is no cure for that. There's no 12-step program. We don't even have a brochure. I'd like to play for you, what am I going to play?
I don't know.
How about Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yes.
Once again, I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank especially my wife, because without her, I wouldn't be here. I literally would be attending my funeral instead. Because if she didn't make me take that last test that I was refusing to take, I had to walk right out, and the heart attack would have finished, and I'd be gone. So, thank you, Claudia. Thank each and every one. I'm going to be working very, very hard for the next, well, till I'm gone, to make people better and leave the world out of pain. That's what it's about. Thank you guys. Let's go have lunch.
Lunch is in the back.
Lunch is in the back, in the cafeteria.
And if you're in a black chair that goes to the cafeteria, could you take it back?
Okay, thank you.